Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Private Prep's first executive functioning webinar for fall 2020, part of our Thrive in 30 series, Simple Skills of Successful Students. We are getting started right now, and I'd like to introduce Jenna, our Director of Executive Functioning Services and Tutor Development, Jenna Brada, and Brooke Bronstein and Melanie Berovic from our Executive Functioning team, who will be chiming in as the discussion continues. If you have questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We'll be able to keep track of anything you have that Jenna can answer in the moment, or we will circle back to some of those questions at the end, as she may be answering them kind of along the way. We are recording this, just so you know, and we're about to get started. So I'm gonna pass it off to Jenna.
All right, thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. All right, so this is our first in a series of webinars. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I took a look at a lot of the questions that you all submitted with your RSVPs. I'm going to try to hit on as many of your ideas as I can and as are relevant tonight. I'll also point out places as we go where other webinars in the series will touch on your questions more deeply. As Chelsea said, feel free to throw questions at us. We will definitely save some time for Q&A at the end. I'll kind of be leading the discussion tonight, but Melanie and Brooke will definitely jump in as they have things to add. And I guess off we go. All right, so I do like to just start off with a little bit of my background. I'm the Director of Executive Functioning here at Private Prep. Prior to Private Prep, I was a teacher and administrator in New York City schools. I've got 2 masters in education, one in teaching and the other one in school administration. For a good amount of my time in city schools, I also oversaw the behavioral and academic interventions in a 6 through 12 setting. So that's where a lot of my background prior to Private Prep comes, and this has been what I do here. So that's me in a nutshell. I also want to just say that I know we've got a variety of perspectives here tonight. It looks like we've got some parents of various age children. Also, we've got a couple tutors, and you're headed into also a variety of situations in the fall. Sounds like some people are doing all remote school, some are headed into a hybrid situation, and some are headed to an all in-person situation. So I will do my best to sort of hit on all of those different perspectives, but certainly if there's an area of particular interest, throw a question in the chat and redirect. And also you can always follow up with us following the webinar. We are more than happy, of course, to speak with you one-on-one. All right, and then the last little thing is that this webinar is going to kind of be the broadest in the series, and we will get into some of the ideas that I present tonight more deeply as we move forward into other webinars in the series. With all of that, I just want to start with an overview of what executive functioning is. Very, very, very broadly, these are the skills that we need to get things done, right? And so when you think of things like setting a goal, making a plan to achieve that goal, which includes breaking down our assignments, prioritizing them, deciding when to do them, and then following through on that goal. So getting started, having motivation to do that, remembering what it is you have to do, organizing your actual materials. This also falls into studying and taking notes, and all of those things are part of executive functioning skills. I suspect many of you are here because you saw this up close and personal with your kids in the spring and noticed that they have some areas that they could work on. And probably also notice that school offers a lot of structure that supports executive functioning, and that's tough to do at home, particularly if you're still working and it's totally unexpected. And so kind of within that vein, what I just want to make sure we all know is that these are skills that all students in middle school, high school, often in college are still developing, and that's really just a function of how our brains work. The complex executive functioning skills don't even begin to develop until 11, really at the youngest, most very often closer to 13. And that continues well into our 20s, right? So you shouldn't feel like if your children are struggling with any of these things that they have an issue or you necessarily need to run and get them evaluated. This is all extremely, extremely normal. And what's awesome is that adolescents' brains are in a growth spurt. And so they're actually overproducing neurological connections. And if we help them set up really strong habits now, have the ability to reinforce the pathways that are going to be most helpful to them and make them really strong as their brains are growing, right? Because their brains will put more effort into developing the areas that they use and will actually prune back on the neurological connections of the areas that they don't use. So now is a great time for you to be thinking about how to help your kids be organized and plan ahead and all those things because they're life skills. Brooke and Melanie, do either of you want to jump in with anything else about what EF skills are? Do you want to just jump in when you feel like it? Do you want me to be checking in with you throughout?
You can check in, but I think that was a perfect, clear description. So good job, Jenna.
Thanks so much. All right, beautiful. So in terms of skills that successful students have, one of them is that they know how to set reasonable goals. I know a lot of parents ask about goal setting. How do you get kids to set? Parents often are focused on setting big goals. And I would actually encourage you to scale back and think about incremental goals. It is wonderful to have a college that you're shooting for in 6 years, right? But really, in order to be super motivated, one, you want to do something more immediate for students because, that delayed gratification is really difficult. Also, incremental goals allow students to feel more success. And that's incredibly important for their motivation, right? And so what we really want to see is that whatever goals students set are things that they can be successful with 50% or more of the time, right? Because that's how they're going to build a habit. That's how they're going to feel good about themselves. And as they achieve those smaller goals, you can then have them set another goal, right? And incrementally move towards sort of those bigger ticket items. I also know that it often comes up that, kids don't have the goals we want them to have, right? Parents are often talking about academic goals, and sometimes kids are talking about other things. And I would just assert that almost any goal a kid can have can kind of be brought back to academics if you engage them in a conversation about it, right? So for example, I want to be a famous photographer. Wonderful. In order to get the best training to be able to do that, right, you're going to need to get into an art school. The only way you get access to that is if you are a successful student now, right? The best art schools are looking for successful students. Even the kids who are like, well, I just want to eke by and get enough. Okay, great. You still need a plan to do that, right? You still need to figure out, what does it require for me to eke by, right? What are the assignments that I need to get done today? What are the things that are coming up? Because if you're not paying attention, you're bound to miss more than you wanted to, right? So I think just engaging with those conversations can be a way to create motivation for things that kids might not connect to their longer term goals. And the other thing is to try and make goals process oriented as opposed to tied to numbers, right? I think it's really easy for us to want students to earn an A or get a high whatever grade, or to get a certain percentage on a test. But if we can shift that to, I'm going to, do all of my homework this week, right? That is something, one, that is very easy for them to measure. And two, it shifts the goal to something that is fully within their control. Because the reality is that grades, while they can do a lot to earn a particular grade, that's not a thing that they're ultimately deciding, right? And so we want to have them set goals that are related to things that are fully within their control. All right. I think I'm good there. Brooke, you were
Can I
not.
add just something
Yes,
really quickly?
absolutely.
What Jenna just said, as well as sometimes we want to bring it back to academic, but also if they have something that you might not be able to do that, we can parallel a personal goal as well. So there might be something, some kids, times our students are much more intrinsically motivated by something they want to do that might be a more personal, non-academical, and use that to parallel an academic goal, perhaps saying that how did they get to, like, how did they reach that goal, or how are they working on that, which might be something that they're just doing because they are more motivated to do that more so, and go through those steps that they did, and you'll see they'll connect a parallel on how to work on an academic goal as well.
Awesome. Yes, wonderful, important point about finding kids where they are.
Yes, and I find that is really helpful for a lot of them to make that connection when it's not just about school sometimes.
Beautiful.
That's all.
All right, love it. I think the other thing that really successful students do is they really are thoughtful about building their toolkit of strategies. Many students, if you engage them in a conversation about how do you prepare for a test, the answer is just, well, I make a Quizlet deck, or I do the study guide that my teacher handed me, and that's sort of the end of the whole thing. And they're not really reflecting on and evaluating those strategies to decide if they're good strategies for them personally. And we want to challenge kids to individualize their education, because there are loads of ways that we can engage with all of the content. So we want them to begin to look for strategies that are individualized, systematic, as in, you know, every time I get an English test, I have a way that I know that works for me that I can rely on, that are efficient, right? If we can study more quickly, that's better. What are the kinds of ways that my brain grabs onto information? And obviously effective, right? We often get students, I studied for 5 hours and I didn't get the grade I wanted. Well, then you studied wrong, right? And we need to step back and look at those strategies and figure out something that will be effective. That often involves leveraging their strengths, which of course requires that they be aware of their strengths, right? And so I think of things like, we have had students that are wonderful at planning, but not so great at time management, for instance, right? And so we need to know that, right? We need to know that this kid can come up with a plan, but might not be incredibly accurate when they're estimating how long it will take them to execute each step of that plan. And kind of the way we can leverage their strength there is to have a plan for when the plan falls through, right? Because that's a kid who's comfortable with, you know, plan A, plan B, plan C. And if they're comfortable with that, we want to go with that right from the beginning so that they are using the tools that they personally have. The other thing to be aware of is these tools are going to vary across different subjects, right? The way that students, I think the easiest way to illustrate this is to think about how students approach reading. And I know that that's one that is often a challenge. Reading your book for your literature class, right, your novel, should not look the same as reading your biology textbook. And really having students know that and know that they need a different set of tools, right? We're thinking about literary devices and theme when we're reading a novel. And when we go to look at the biology textbook, we should be looking at the headings, and we're probably outlining as opposed to just annotating the text. And then in terms of building the toolbox, you want to keep track of these things as you figure them out, right? If kids don't already have this toolbox, it can be easy to not remember, did that strategy I tried worked? Or, pardon me, did that strategy I tried work or not? And so you want to write it down and take note of, this strategy worked really well for me when I prepared for my English test. I also want to try it in another subject, or I recognize that it won't be effective for another subject. I love to have kids write down study strategies, note-taking strategies, and have next to them sort of when they use them, so that it's easy for them to get started with assignments as well, right? Because knowing what works for you lowers the threshold to be able to engage with any material that's handed your way. Good. It's funny, I can't see anyone's faces, so I just have to assume you're doing great. If you're not doing great, type something in the questions. All right. The other piece is to make sure that we're using environmental supports, right? Anything that we can take out of our brain and put into our environment is going to free up space for us to really be able to think deeply about the content that we're engaged with. So that we can be deeper problem solvers and so that we can have less stress. I'm sure all of you have had a day where you're trying to hold your entire to-do list in your head, and it's extremely stressful because you finish one thing and, oh my God, what was the next thing? And did I forget a thing? And oh shoot, I forgot that. And so you use environmental supports by doing things like writing down your to-do list. And some really effective things that students can do is to use timers. I know lots of students struggle with knowing how long their actual attention span is, right? The reality is it doesn't make sense to sit down and study for 2 hours. Your brain is going to fatigue. It's much smarter to set a timer for 20 minutes and then set another timer for a 5-minute break and then go back to work, right? If kids are constantly running late, the timer is helpful just so that they know when to stop, right? I am someone who often likes to try to squeeze in extra things. So a timer for me is helpful to know like, oh, no more squeezing in now, I have to get out the door. I touched a little bit on breaks just speaking there. I think breaks get a really bad rap. I know a lot of private prep tutors talk to me about, well, I don't want to bring a break into any of my sessions because the parents will think I'm being lazy about it. And I know a lot of kids feel that way too. If I just push through and I don't get a break, I'll get done faster. But I really think it's important to frame breaks as tools that are helpful to working well. And again, you've probably seen that in yourself, right? It is not a healthy day if you sit down at your computer at 9 a.m. and don't get up and stretch your legs or drink some water or just, think about something else for some moment before you get up again at 5 p.m., right? And so we want to have our children be healthy, and breaks are part of that. Visual reminders are awesome, right? I think, we've all met the student, probably some of them are your children, who get out the door and they don't have their lunch, or they get out the door and they don't have their calculator. And so just having a visual checklist of what you need to bring with you can be very helpful. And again, just lessens stress significantly. I don't think, I've got the list right here because I think it's important. And also a really great idea is to just have a contact list ready, particularly because we're moving into this hybrid situation, right? And kids are going to be more isolated than they are when they're going into a school day. Having a list, whether it's of the teacher's contact information or just classmates, so that when they inevitably run into questions during their hybrid day or find something unclear about the instructions they've got, it's super easy for them to reach out and ask questions. And it also normalizes this idea that asking questions is healthy and good. And that's a huge part of self-advocacy, which is going to be helpful to them generally. If they can get in the habit of asking for clarity, that's also going to set them up to get in the habit of asking for, and again, I think this is going to be important with remote learning, adjustments on things, right? I think different schools are running different schedules about when due dates are that may or may not be easily fit into your family's schedule. And I know most districts that I am aware of are open to the idea of collaborating with students and parents. And so if we can really lean in this year to the idea of education that is a collaborative process, and we should be in contact with our teachers and expressing our needs and asking for them to meet us where we are, I think we're setting ourselves up for a better year. And also the teachers, because teachers want to see the kids be successful. And they like it when students ask them for help and make clear what they're struggling with. All right. Any other environmental supports, Brooke or Melanie, that you guys think are super important?
I just want to add to that though, if as a parent, if you, just what Jenna's saying, just to really stress the fact, if your child has a question, even if you help them format an email or something, really encourage, even if a younger child as well, them to email the teacher or however they communicate with them. Because like she said, the more they do it, the more they feel comfortable, but also, we want to scaffold them to start doing this on their own. And this is a great time during this hybrid learning to start doing that and understand that. So I just really, really encourage the parent to take the step out and let the child do it, even if you're helping them do it, and bridge that.
Awesome. Melanie, you were unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, nothing really new, but just putting the emphasis on the breaks part. I just find it, especially with my experience with working with students, they're so important. Even though it sounds like taking a break, it might sound like the student is getting off task. It actually really is so efficient in keeping them on task, because the break is usually quite small, and it kind of just gives them a chance to breathe, because a lot of times they'll get overwhelmed. But in taking small breaks in a long period of time of, let's say, a session or studying, etc., it actually really, it's just so much more efficient. And I just really like that you highlighted that, and I'm glad that we're talking about that. That's all I wanted to add.
Wonderful. Okie dokie. And planning to plan. This is so incredibly important. I think we often talk about, setting up your calendar, having your to-do list, cleaning up your desk, and having everything you need there. But no system maintains itself. And so part of having success with any system is setting aside time to maintain the system itself, right? So even if you set up everything possible in your physical space, from paper organizers to all your supplies, you want to pick a point in the week where you're going to just take 5 or 10 minutes to straighten up. Or if you're the kind of person that needs to pick that point every day, then pick that point every day, but kind of think about what's going to work for you. And again, just like the study strategies, really personalize the system, including a way to maintain it, right? If it's calendars or to-do lists, when are you going to make your daily to-do list, right? I think particularly for hybrid learning, it's important to figure out when you're going to organize your day, even if your family is able to have a relatively predictable schedule to the day. The teachers are posting the assignments when they're posting them, and you have to figure out when is your child going to gather everything that's expected of the day, plug it into their calendar, ask any questions they have about assignments, and also kind of having time in there to adjust, right? Because any system that we create, we're going to do our best when we set it up, but as you use it, and again, I'm sure you have all seen this, as you use it, you realize the shortcomings or the things that you thought you would do that, as it turns out, you won't do. And I think if you just recognize from the beginning that part of the maintenance of the system is adjusting it, it feels like less of a failure. Right? And so if you say, I'm setting up my planner today and I'm going to update it, every day before the school day starts, that's a wonderful thing to say. Hopefully you do it. Hopefully you set aside that time. But if you find that really what's happening is your teachers aren't posting until midday, it's okay to shift that. And that's success, recognizing the need to make that adjustment, as opposed to failure that your original plan wasn't the right plan. I also have a note here. This is important. I added this, in response to your guys' questions. I think it's worth flagging that even young kids can do this planning to plan and be a part of building their daily schedule, right? I have a 7-year-old who, by May, wasn't in March, right? It took a little while for us to build there, but by May of last school year, she was getting up and dictating her to-do list to me rather than me getting up early and going through Google Calendar on my own. She was pulling it up and she was able to do that. And that's empowering, right? Because then she's telling me rather than me telling her, and that feels very different in terms of her motivation. All right. Everybody looks good. All the people I can see. Great. We touched a little bit on self-advocacy earlier. I think it's just worth noting a couple ways that students can self-advocate besides just asking questions. If there are office hours, and I know a lot of schools are trying to create them within the hybrid model, use them, even if it's just to share work that you feel good about, because building those relationships with teachers, one, is just a good way to get clarity on assignments that you do have questions on. But the other thing that is true and that we're sort of not supposed to say is that, like, while teachers are supposed to be objective, they are humans, right? And when it's time to decide who gets partial credit or whose grade gets rolled up, if you know that the student's been making the effort throughout the quarter or the semester to form a relationship with you, to clarify whatever questions they have, to show that they're proud of their work, you just tend to give them the benefit of the doubt, and that only works in the student's favor. So office hours, sharing work. Anytime there's an essay due, why not have your rough draft done a day or two before it's really due and share it with your teacher? Teachers are often happy to look at that. And if you get their feedback earlier, then you can adjust, and that's going to help you, right? I like to have students who make study guides also share them with their teachers. Teachers will tell you if you're missing an important topic or if the way you have it included on your study guide isn't what they had in mind. And it's a great way then to get those fixed. And again, we already talked about this, but requesting variance, I think, is gonna be something that we all want to do at some point in this year. And taking the time to build the relationship early on will make the teacher more likely to want to collaborate in any way possible when that variance is necessary. Positive reinforcement. This is kind of a cheat that I put this in here because it's supposed to be habits of successful students. Some students are really good about giving themselves positive reinforcement, but I just want to plug this because I know there's a lot of parents here. I think it is very easy to fall out of balance between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement as relates to academics, right? It's easy to fall into the nagging and the reminding and the did you and why didn't you? But it's been shown time and time again that our brains adjust and our habits adjust more quickly in response to positive reinforcement as compared to negative reinforcement, right? So if you can shift your language to recognizing when they're doing something good and just make an effort to say it, even if you feel silly, even if it feels to you like something that of course they should be doing, making an effort to say positive things is extremely helpful. Helping them remember their goals. So rather than kind of focusing on negative behavior, kind of asking, you know, is this going to help you achieve the goal that you set? This is, of course, assuming that you worked with them to set goals like we talked about at the beginning, right? Because then oftentimes students, the children, right, can self-correct. If you just keep their goals present for them, then they're able to reflect on if their behavior is helping achieve their goal. Rewards. We've got a lot more about this in the motivation webinar, so I don't want to get into it too much, but I think deciding on rewards ahead of time is extremely powerful in terms of creating that positive reinforcement. And also just, and this is a way that students can do this together, is encourage them to have an accountability partner. If it's a student who is already diligent about their studies, but is worried about their ability to stay on top of everything when they're so on their own this school year, encourage them to find a friend that's also diligent and to hold each other accountable and to check in with each other. This way, if there's anything that one student forgot, the other can remind them, and kind of creating a bit of a team and we're in this together atmosphere can be super helpful as we move into all the strangeness that is surely headed our way. All right, that's most of the stuff. Your turn to apply it. Of course, there's going to be more webinars where we will get into specific topics moving forward. We've got physical organization coming up. We've got talk about motivating students. We've got talk about time management and flexibility with planning. And then we've also got talk about using a planner and using a calendar to help prioritize your tasks. So all of those are free. We would love to see you. If you already know that you would love to have your student kind of get something set for the start of the school year, we can do a strategy session where we just dive right in with them to setting some goals together and figuring out how to achieve them. And then we've also got, in recognition, again, of all the weirdness that is this school year, an academic skills seminar series where if there's a couple kids that want to gear up for the school year together. We'll do 4 workshops in a small group, and then set up each of those kids following the workshop series with individualized plans to apply the strategies that we talk about. All right, question time for like 0 minutes because I talked for a whole half hour. I'm good to stay unless Chelsea yells at me.
We're good to stay. Anyone got any questions?
Not a 1.
All right, then I guess we're gonna wrap up. Unless anyone's got anything to throw in that chat box, we can finish this up. Jenna, what do you say?
Oh, I see a chat. What ages do I think this is best for?
Thank you.
So to my mind, executive functioning services or academic skill support make the most sense from middle school up. I know elementary school students need executive functionings. Yes. So son going into his senior year, absolutely. Because this is a key year that you want to help your son take control of all these aspects of his learning himself, right? Because next year, hopefully, he's in college, and he's going to want to have all of these systems in place, particularly with the additional freedom that comes when you hit college. So being able to manage the schedule and set his own priorities is going to be key, both to his success this year, but especially to his success once he is on his own. Go, Brooke, go.
I think just like, though it can be used really any age, there's, and at different ages, we're giving them different tools to use or expand upon. So even the younger students is really helpful because we can show them just healthy habits to begin. And then as they get older, it becomes a little bit more intensified, you know, a little bit more strategic and planning and all that kind of stuff. So really.
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna follow up with Brooke and then I see your question, Joni, I'm not ignoring you. Yes, and again, that's why I say middle school up, because we want to start working with them as their brains move into this growth spurt where they're really ready to start developing these skills, right? Because that makes life so much easier as you go. The structure of how we work with them. As a general rule, we start off with a strategy session that's about 75 minutes long where we meet with you and with your child and we talk about what are their goals and we ask about, you know, how they've studied in the past, how they keep track of their assignments and really try to get to know them. And then also use that as a jumping off point to write goals as well as plans for how they can achieve those goals. We can give you more details. They'll be in the follow-up email. And then after that, we move into ongoing coaching, which happens in kind of any increments, right? It might be 15-minute check-ins that happen periodically throughout the week. It might be a longer session that happens once a week. And that's going to vary depending on your students' goals and their strengths and their weaknesses, right? So it's really an extremely individualized surface. Which makes it hard to say this is exactly what we do, but I'd be happy to follow up with you, Joni, one-on-one. Are there books, workbooks, planners we recommend for high schoolers? Yes, certainly. I think I would want to know a little bit more. I think if you're looking to have them work on some executive functioning things on their own, and there's a student who's going to be engaged in that, I really like the Smart But Scattered series from Peg Dawson. If you're looking just for tools that are helpful, I really like the Alta Ipsum is actually an app, but it is wonderful. Brooke's smiling because we had the developer on our call this morning. He's someone that I've known for a couple of years. It's awesome. It's really designed for students. It does things like when you put in that an essay is due next week, it puts in a suggested time to have a rough draft, a suggested time to have an outline, and a suggested time to do your research. It helps with goal setting. It's wonderful if you're looking for kind of a all-in-one tool. I don't know, Anna, if that gets at everything you want to do. Yes, it is Alta Ipsum. ALTAIPSUM. We can include a link in the email that we send out. Thanking you all for coming. All right. I think now perhaps we are good.
Right. Thank you everyone so much for coming, and do be sure to keep an eye on our social media. We'll be talking about the upcoming webinars. We'll be sending out a thank you email with all of this information and more. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Happy Wednesday evening. Be well.
Bye,
Have a good night.
everyone.
Bye.